Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Lunchtime Learnings. I'm delighted to be joined by Debbie Franklin, who is a consultant to the property industry. Years and years and years, like me, of experience. Absolutely passionate about the industry and raising the standards, and also passionate about tech. So, Debbie, thank you so much for joining me today. And welcome. I'm really grateful for you giving up your time. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you got into agency and consultancy and all your years at Andrews.
Okay, well, thanks very much for having me along, Stephen. I'm quite honoured to be asked. I'm amongst some very esteemed guests that you've had before, so thank you. Yeah, I think my journey into the industry started a little bit like most people in property. You end up falling into it. Had nobody in my family within the property industry at all. I started basically. I got a secretarial role. Somebody sort of said to me, "Oh, there's a estate agency looking for a secretary. And would you like to go for it?" So I started with that, and that was with Asda Property Services.
Okay.
They were the first thoroughly driving to the bottom of the market, I suppose. They advertised fees at 1%, which obviously got a lot of ridicule at the time. But they did challenge the market, I suppose, from the point of view of them being open 9 till 7, so it was all quite longer hours and things. But yeah, started there. So that was, they just did estate agency. So I did some secretarial work. I was, because you had customers, you had an open shop. You were talking to the customers all the time, and I really found that sort of love of being able to talk to customers about the property and finding somebody their perfect home, really. So I did that, progressed on to be a negotiator, even did mortgages, because those were the days pre all the regulations. So I wrote some mortgages. And then that was the crash happened. So after that, they folded, basically Asda folded the business. So I did a little spell in recruitment. Didn't like recruitment at all. Not a job for me. So I stuck it out for 6 months whilst I was looking for something else. And then I saw that Andrews were looking for people, and I applied to them, and they phoned me up and said, "How would you fancy lettings?" I said, I know nothing about lettings whatsoever, but I'll come and have a chat. And actually, I ended up working with a lady who'd worked with me in Andrews Property, so in Asda. Our paths had crossed, and I ended up working for her, setting up the first lettings business in Bristol for Andrews, or in the southwest, because historically all they had were lettings within the southeast of Andrews. So I started off basically a jack of all trades at that point, because there were just the two of us. It was the buy-to-let boom. We were probably one of the first letting agencies to have a high street front office, because we were tucked around the corner, next to a brothel, which made for interesting customers, sometimes getting it wrong. But basically, you had to do everything. And my job was sort of a coordinator, but I was doing viewings, I was sorting out property management. We had to learn on the job, basically. So I did a week's training in the southeast, but we did everything. We even did inventories at the time, writing our own inventories and everything. So it was pre-technology. And I then progressed. Majority of my career was then with Andrews. I was with them for 27 years. Thoroughly enjoyed it. They gave me a great grounding as a business. I love their ethos, the morals that underpinned, and the ethics that underpinned the business was always very. That's what drew me to the business, I think, at the beginning, and I think that always underpinned with my values, because I always wanted to do things properly, wanted to do things right. So always made sure that I educated myself through courses that they put myself on, or things. I was always reading industry news and things, and legislation, keeping up to date with legislation. So I think that was always really, really important, because, you know, as talking to your customers, you wanted to make sure that they did it right. So we had so many people, because it was a buy-to-let boom, people were investing in property and didn't have a clue. And very much I was all about helping people to do it right first time, and then you don't, you know, you're not digging yourself out of the hole later on down the line, really. So I did a stint there as a property manager. I moved into property management, I stuck that out for a year and decided that property management was not my bag at all. I have a utmost healthy respect for any property manager who can deal with that day to day. They're one of the most valuable team members, really, in the industry, I think, in terms of lettings and management. And I did it for a year. I then moved. I said, I want to be a negotiator. I want to be a full-time negotiator. Applied for the first job, got a knockback, and I thought, that's my fault. I went into that a little bit too cocky, I suppose, at the time. Sort of thinking, yeah, I can do this, without actually being able to prove it. So I then set about making sure that I knew what I needed to change about myself, or what I needed to learn to be able to prove that I could do it the next time around. So when another job opportunity came up, I applied for that, and that was actually opening up a greenfield office site. We had a lettings estate agency business in Downend, so it was actually opening the lettings there, so completely new. So I went in there with somebody else, and we built that up from nothing to, you know, sort of, and then I rose through the ranks there. They asked me to take it over as the sort of valuer, senior valuer, and then from there, I then got asked to go back around that very well, built that up into its own branch with its own property management. And then I got asked to go back and run the Clifton office, because it was taking a little bit of a dive down. So they said, can you go back and run that? So I went in, and yeah, that was a big challenge. And I think that's where I probably learned my trade as a manager. Made plenty of mistakes. I was always on the phone to HR going, why won't people do what I asked them to do? And realizing that you had to coach people, and you also, I think importantly, you've got to get the right people in the right roles. I learned that right people, right role, right office as well. That's what's important. You know, it's sort of very much about doing that. And then I ran that for about 5 years. It became the most profitable branch within lettings, within Andrews, won many awards, branch manager of the year, that type of thing. And then they created, the business was getting bigger and bigger, and then they created area manager positions. And I applied for that and was very successful. And I became an area manager for 12 years. And I built from, well, I think when I took it over, there were 6 branches. I took it to 13. So I built the area big enough to actually then say, well, I think we could bring on a trainee area manager in effect, and sort of split the areas a little bit. So because I couldn't expand it any further, it needed to be able to give everything you need to be able to do. You needed to have more time. In between that, I also opened the asset management division of Andrews as well. So that was dealing with receivership work, which was very interesting. Got a department all up and running. We're going to get 250 properties. I had all these filing cabinets and everything ready, some staff, and waiting for the courier to come with all these files. And a guy turned up in a crash helmet with an envelope about that big. And I said, is that it? And he said, that's all I've been given. And basically, for 150 properties, all we had was an envelope that big with some information in and a few spreadsheets. And it was like, okay, we've got to find out where these 150 properties are, who's living in them, and start to get rent off of these people. So that was a really steep learning curve into also the more corporate environment or corporate clients as well. So dealing with corporate clients. And then I grew that business even further, tendered for a corporate management of a corporate portfolio of 1,000 properties. So I was part of the tender team. It was me that pushed it and said, look, we could tender for this, we could do this, it's all around the country. And my boss was saying, oh, but it's all around the country, it's not just in our branch network. I said, so what? We can do this. I was always challenging the status quo, I think, a little bit. I was always sort of curious and always wanted what else can we get our fingers into, as it were. And I basically, my boss said, okay, we've got to write a tender document. You could help do that. You can start that off. And I said, okay, so how do we write a tender document? He said, I don't know. So I Googled how to write a tender document and set about with drafting in all the other people, marketing, etc., technology, our IT guy. And wrote and helped put together a very successful tender, and we won the business for 1,000 properties. And I got the phone call when I was a day off to say, Debbie, congratulations, you've now got 1,000 properties winging its way over to you over the next 2 months. And I had to staff it up, build a department, bring people in, and onboard 1,000 properties that were being managed by 8 other agents around the country. So that was a huge learning curve. And the importance there, I think what I learned from that, the importance was about having the right processes in place, people with a can-do attitude. I asked for staff who could work evenings and weekends, because we're going to have to make phone calls. And I think the whole point of that was about putting people at the heart of it. So when you're dealing with people in the property and people that work for you, you've got to make sure that you've got people who've got empathy skills, because we were having to deal with people and say to them, don't pay your rent to this person, you've now got to pay your rent to us. So there's got to be a trust element there. So I asked lots of staff if they work weekends, evenings, got on board some staff, then onboarded some temporary staff through networking of, have you got team, family members who want to work for us for a little bit, and even some people that I knew, that youngsters that had just left school, university, and didn't have a clue what they wanted to do, and it's like, do you want to do a couple of hours work on the phone, talking to some people I knew I could trust, and I'm quite pleased to say that 3 of those people actually went on to then join us in various different roles further down the line, which was great. And so I ran that very well. And then I was always looking for another challenge. So I went to my boss and said, look, I was doing that alongside being an area manager as well. So I handed over, I put a manager in place for the asset business, somebody who could, I could trust and that could really take it forward. And they took it forward even further, which was fabulous. And then I sort of said to him, I want to do something else. I'm not quite sure what at the moment, but I'm always innovating. I was always pushing boundaries within the business, because I was also the only woman within Andrews, other than one board member, lady board member, who I looked up to an awful lot, who unfortunately passed away very young. And still a little bit emotional about that now. And she was always, I suppose, my inspiration at the time, for somebody who I looked up to, who also championed me, which was fantastic. And she actually came to me and sort of said, Debbie, we've got a role. We want to. I suppose it was in the early days of Purple Bricks. We were looking very much at, could we do our own online thing and have our own online marketplace and using technology. She was very forward thinking from the point of view of how customers could interact with the business. So I started up, I basically stopped being an area manager, and I immersed myself in the world of property technology, prop tech as it's known. I remember going to my first conference and meeting the fantastic Viking, that's Christian Byfield. And I think there was me, Christian, and one other agent in a room of about 150 people, and the rest of them were prop tech suppliers. We were like bees around a honey pot. Everybody wanted to talk to us because we were the only agents there. And I was just bamboozled with all this technology. I'm not a techie, but what I do is I look at technology from the point of view of, can it solve a problem, and is it easy to use, either whether it's that the employee is going to be using it, your staff, or whether that's actually the client. And so those were the things that I looked for first of all. I then handed it over to our IT director to then look at it from a point of view, was it robust as technology, and that sort of side of it, and does it under the bonnet stuff. I was looking at the superficial user experience side of things, and that was how I always chose. And also one of the things that Rhonda Green taught me was very much work with people that you like and respect, and that are honest as well, and that are on your same wavelength, because it's a partnership. It's not just a supplier, it's actually you're working in partnership with people. So that's where I got into the prop tech side of things, did that for a couple of years, and then unfortunately business changed quite a little bit, and that role got made redundant. So I then took a little bit of time out, and then I ended up immersing myself. I got a job doing very, very much the same sort of thing, but with the build to rent market up in Manchester. So again, a different aspect of the business, which was a real eye opener, and is very much a corporate sort of side of things in terms of how the corporates look at the build to rent side. Then I did a bit of travelling off to South Africa after that for 3 months, and came back 3 weeks before COVID, which made for interesting times. And then I did a little bit of because during COVID didn't have any role, so I helped out Christian with his Agents Here to Help. When everybody started to collaborate, I noticed you said that on, that was the whole thing with during COVID. Everybody started to collaborate, and agents, and I got talking to more and more agents, and was inspired by people like Sarah Edmondson, who set up the morning meeting, and it was really, really good. Although through a tough time, there were lots of good things that came out of that, and then I started working for a small independent business where the owner is actually abroad. And she asked me to take over her business and run her business for her. So I did that for sort of 2.5 years as well during COVID. So that made for an interesting time, because I didn't see her for, I think, about a year. Never met face to face because of COVID, because she couldn't travel. So that was a really great experience, and actually quite good to go back into working for a one branch business and reminding yourself what it's like to not have your own IT departments and all of that sort of side of things. So so that's my potted history.
Well, I don't know where to start to unpick all of that, but thank you. I'm going to come back and see what I can remember. I think this is a test, a bit like the generation game. What's gone through, and how much can you remember? So let's go back to the beginning, and my dog's just joined me as well. So what questions you got, Chewy? Hey, you want to ask? So let's start with building a team then. So what you've achieved is absolutely fantastic. So congratulations to you, and no wonder you come so highly recommended, and so many people think so highly of you with everything that you do and you continue to do, and that you've done. But just coming back, actually, so let's just say I'm an agent today. I'm starting from scratch. I've got no idea how to get new lettings properties. Where would I begin if you were that agent today? So let's give them some value.
Yeah. I think you've got to network. You've got to get out there. You've got to be speaking to people, because anybody you come into contact with can be a potential landlord. So, sort of getting into sort of any local business networking groups. I was working in the Clifton Village sort of side of things, and there was a local little business, there was a bid district side of things, and got involved with them. So you're looking for referrals and trying to promote their business as well, because, if you're being seen to shop local and do those sorts of things, it's very much just talking. It's talking to people. It's getting out, talking to people, networking, talking, sort of contractors, people, family, friends of family. It's so if you're starting from nothing, you've really got to get out there and talk to people. And also now you've got technology at your disposal to actually get yourself visible. So it's making those videos and becoming the authority for your area, really. What you're going to niche yourself in, or what you're going to specialize in. So yeah, that's what you've got to do. And see everybody knows somebody who's a landlord, so it's asking that question.
100%. So you also talked about property managers and your experience as a property manager, and that you move quickly on. So what do you think makes a good property manager?
Somebody who likes seeing a job, who gets a kick out of solving a problem, because very often you get a problem and you can't actually always visually see it in detail. So you've really got to ask the questions and build up a good support network of contractors around you that you can rely on, that you need to manage, and basically be able to get to the root of a problem and see something through to the finish. I think, that's, and build those relationships with people. So with your landlords, with your contractors, with your tenants as well, because they're customers. They're not tenants, they're customers. So, yeah.
So something that I really like when you talked about at the start was you talked about your values. You talked about being more educated, know more about the legislation, and acknowledge your competitors. So again, where does that, I suppose, passion, and then you also mentioned the word curiosity as well, come from, about learning and becoming better? And again, where does that come from? Is that within you, or can you gain those skills?
I think I've always been curious. I think in terms of, as a child, I always want to know why. I'm not a technical person. I don't like reading business books particularly. So for me, you have to accept your own learning style. And I think I found that like now podcasts are fantastic, things like that. Going on courses, putting yourself through courses, or asking your employer if they'll sponsor you through various things. I did all my ARLA qualifications very early on. I became an ARLA rep as well later on. So those things, and learning from those people, and surrounding yourself with like-minded people that want to learn as well. I think that's the key thing. Never being afraid to ask. I think I've always just, how do you do that? Show me how you do that. Sort of tell me how you do that. I had at one point when I was working in Clifton, a guy, Andrew, set up the block management side of things in my office. So they took some space in my office. But I was always in there going, well, what are the challenges you face? How do you do that? So that I was well versed in all aspects of property, so that if I was out talking to a landlord about letting his property, but then he talked about it as a flat and he had challenges with the property management company, I could sort of empathise a little bit. I had a little bit of understanding. So again, that's that knowledge. It's getting yourself, even though I did sales for a short period of time, I was always interested in, and I went into lettings. I think the fact I was in lettings for 27 years and sales for 2 tells you my bias. But I was still always interested in what my sales colleagues were doing. So any office I walked into, I didn't just go to my lettings department. I used to go to the sales side of the business and have a chat to them, understand their challenges. And you learn so much from talking to people and that networking within the industry. And also outside of the industry, I joined like a coaching business development networking thing for ladies. But it was all different types of businesses. So you learn from them and their challenges. And I think there's lots of things you can replicate from different industries into your own as well. So that's how I learn, basically.
Okay. So what one thing has resonated with you and worked well from another industry then?
I think it's from retail, from really good retail, how they treat their customers. So the sort of higher end brands and things like that, where they put the customer at the heart of something. And that sort of customer journey side of things, which is what the marketing director I worked for, that she opened my eyes to, about how you get the customer and you want to keep them within your brand, as it were. And I think that's what I took forward, that however they interacted with Andrews, I wanted them to stay within Andrews. So if they were a landlord and then they wanted to sell, you wanted them to sell with Andrews, or block manage with Andrews, or do their mortgage. And that customer journey side of things is from retail, I think, very much so.
Okay, so that's interesting. So from my experience, I don't know whether you agree, and I'm sorry if I alienate all the audience that listen, but 95% of agents just see it as a one-off transaction rather than a whole client for life. How can agents change that? I mean, I just see there's so lack of stay in touch policies when it comes to people that buy, then seem to go into witness protection and never get heard. You've got let only landlords that potentially that you can convert to fully manage, but no one's calling the landlord after 21 days to see how the tenants have settled in, or a month after to see whether the first month's rent is paid. What can agents do to change that? One of the words that I like when you said is putting the right processes in place, and I know process is very important, but what's stopping agents doing this? Why are they chasing the new transaction, whereas keeping that client for life?
I think it comes down to diary management. I think first and foremost, you've got to factor it in the diary, because if it's not in the diary, it's not going to happen. So if you haven't got time set aside for speaking to your customers and getting people to realise, I think sometimes it's getting staff to realise that it's not there as a sales call. You're not there to sell something. You're there to assist somebody. So it's reframing. So it's about making the time and not setting targets with stuff, because I think if you set targets, you've got to make this many calls. Well, for me, it's about quality over quantity. So it's always about the quality of a call that you make to somebody. So you're there to help, find out what their problem is, find out if there's anything we can do, but just that regular touching base. And there's always a hook you can use, or a reason that you can have for those specific calls to happen. So like you said, with your only landlords, picking up the phone, how did the tenant move in go okay, and anything else we can help you with? Have you thought about X or Y, or and that type of thing? But it's all about diary management, because there's no point in going out necessarily pounding the streets and delivering loads of leaflets, because that's a scattergun approach, when you could actually work. And as I remember Chris Watkin always used to say, farming, it's landlord farming. It's about using your database that you've got, because it's gold. Your database is gold, and that's why, you know, when the likes of some of the big corporates are looking to acquire, they're looking to acquire letting portfolios, because that's gold to them. So that's what you've got to concentrate on doing. But it's all about time and putting it in the diary, making sure it happens and it doesn't get moved.
Okay, thank you. So again, one of the things you talked about was balancing. So you had two roles, the area manager role, and you set up that incredible asset management department. How do you manage to balance? And, you know, I suppose time management is really important. And I know you touched on, you know, your diary and what gets scheduled gets done. But any other tips of balancing your processes and everything you have?
Yeah, I'm going to admit that quite often I don't always do it as well as I should. I'm not perfect.
Thank you for your honesty.
I do recognise that sometimes I struggled with it sometimes. So it's about taking a step back. And actually, one of the things, because I've been doing a lot of working from home at the moment, is one of the things that I find is I can get quite immersed in stuff. So what I've done is, just a little tip, is setting the timer on my phone every 50 minutes. So, and it goes off, and then I step away from what I'm doing and have a little bit of reflection time to make sure that I can, you know, sort of reflect back on what I'm doing, or just thinking about something completely different. So get myself a cup of tea, going outside if it's not raining, and just having a think. And I think sometimes, you know, or maybe just reading a little article or something that you've been meaning to read. So it's about having those little breaks and factoring it in.
Okay, so again, another thing that you mentioned, you talked about empathy. So, and, you know, obviously building up departments, you must have recruited a lot of people. How do you find out whether somebody is empathetic? And is there a question that you can ask at the interview stage to do that?
I think that's a good question. Well, the specific question. I haven't interviewed anybody for a long time, so I'm just trying to remember. I think it's one of the things that I used to do is to do a lot of not so much psychometric testing. We did that as certain sort of things, but I used to ask for examples. So very much sort of, can you give me an example of? Because anybody can say they can do something, but what I'm looking for is an example that demonstrates that particular skill set. So I would ask them for an example of a particular skill that I'm looking for, an empathetic skill. So, you know, I wouldn't ask about empathy, but, you know, it's along those lines. I would ask about a particular, you know, and so within that example, you would be looking for those skill sets to be, you know, how they've dealt with a customer in a difficult situation, for example, and really for picking out they've got the listening skills, have they empathized with the customer, you know, that's where it would come out usually. So examples.
Okay, so I had a great question yesterday when I did an interview with Gemma, Noonan, and so the question was, what's the best listening you have ever done, and why?
Oh, the best listening I've ever done. Do you know what? I think it was actually at the Women in Estate Agency conference. I actually found myself, and actually I found that I'd written hardly any notes. And normally when I go along to a conference, I'm so busy writing notes that I don't find myself listening. And I know that Gemma talked about that yesterday when I was listening to her. And so I actually I think that whole day, all I did was just listen. And because I'd opened the book and I think I'd written about 3 things. And so I actually spent the train journey home writing some notes for myself to get stuff down so that I wouldn't forget and things. But I think, I think it was so inspiring that it it just took me in, and it just made me listen. So it's so I think that was my example of listening for a whole day, which is probably quite hard for me.
Well, it was an exceptional event. It really
was.
was.
Yeah.
So I learned loads from it. So I was totally inspired by the day. So I look forward to the one next year.
Yes. Definitely.
Which was great. Tech wise.
Mm-hmm.
So have you got any, and you're not being paid to say this, okay?
Yeah.
No commission. I don't know, maybe there is, but I doubt it. Any products out there that you think agents should be looking at from what you've seen?
There's lots and lots of good products, and which I've worked with and things. However, what I would say is what's right for one business might not be right for your business. So it's all about you assessing what you need first, and then deciding what's right for your business. But some good people that I've worked with over the years, I've worked with Yomdel for live chat, for telephone answering, Moneypenny, absolutely fantastic. Fixflo for dealing with repairs and maintenance. For Rajeev, what he built there, absolutely fantastic. Fantastic sort of, it's Rolls Royce, really, I would say. So Fixflo's fabulous. Goodlord is great for the onboarding, but I know there's some other ones and things coming through as well. So there's lots of different ones out there, but you've got to get the one that's right for you. And most importantly, you've got to onboard it right as well, because you're never, ever going to get the best value out of that business, out of that technology. And one of the things I'm seeing at the moment, and I'm working with people, is very often they're saying, oh, it's not being used, my staff aren't using it, or they're not, the plug-in software is not working, they're not talking to each other. And you very often find that the onboarding side of it could have been a bit better, or the ongoing when you have new staff, it's, making sure they're trained and your processes are right around the software as well. It's not just the software itself, but around the software, because otherwise you've got to do a lot of unraveling of data cleansing and things afterwards. So it's really important to choose what's right for you, and there's platforms like Simon Wells' Kerfuffle, where you can sort of see peer reviews of other software, but you really got to dig down and don't make a rash decision about anything. Make sure you get the right tech.
Okay, really great advice, thank you. So just coming back, a couple more questions, if that's okay with you. Yeah. You talked about onboarding, and I think that's a really good point. Have you got any tips on onboarding, especially when you went from the amount of offices from 1 to 6, and then to 6 to 13, and then you've obviously gone to 1,000, big asset management. So, and you had loads of different people coming in, all your friends, your families, your colleagues, your neighbours. Any tips on onboarding?
Onboarding, I mean, if you're onboarding technology, I think you've got to test it first. I depending on the technology, but I would very much recommend doing like a little bit of a pilot. If you were running it with a couple of branches or something, I did a pilot. We onboarded Goodlord into Andrews, and sort of like a lot of the technologies, this can be done quite quickly. It's like, oh, hang on a second, because there's processes around it that it might affect. So sort of you've got the opportunity to start again at that point and actually have a look at everything and go, what can we take away? What does this take away? What does this alter if we do this on this technology? So, and what I did with that is I ran a test group. So I picked a couple of different branches, and those ones also that were branch managers who were probably more critical, and more doubting about technology. And also those people, you have to have a group of people that can use technology quite well, and those maybe who struggle a little bit, because that's your test, and making sure that you get that right, and take the feedback that you get from them, and how it could be different, and then design your training course and your onboarding from there. And you have to accept that people learn in different ways as well. So you've got to make sure that you've got all of the training to, to suit all different learning styles. So that's what's important.
Okay, so I believe you're also a mentor at Agents Together.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for all the work that you do for everybody there.
Well, I'm a mentee. I'm a mentee, but I am going to sign up as a mentor as well. So.
Well, that's very kind of you. So thank you. How have you find that's benefited you then as a mentee?
Oh, absolutely fabulous. I think what I recognise is you're never too late in your career, sort of in the latter stages of your career to still learn from people, still wanting people that are going to inspire you. And I'm working with Clifford Thomas. He's been absolutely fabulous. And I think what I recognised was, because I'm working on my own a little bit more and didn't have such a big immediate support network that you get when you work for a bigger company, that I needed somebody that I can go to. And that's proved to be brilliant, because, he's a great sounding board, and also makes me stop and think a little bit more, because I can be a bit sort of jump in the deep end. So very much it makes me stop and think. So that's been good.
Okay,
Brilliant.
Thank you. And you said you enjoy podcasts. Any ones that you prefer, you like, that you can recommend?
I dip into quite a few different types, but over the time I've listened to Chris Watkin's his podcasts and things, because there's lots of different ones that I've gone back over and dipped in, ones that I haven't watched. Simon Wells' Kerfuffle side of things, I've watched a couple of those. And then from personal development in terms of health and well-being, I listen to something called Her Spirit podcast, which is Louise Minchin, and it's all around women, and it's been women in business, sport, so about being active and being healthy. So for me, it's not an industry thing, but it's very much about, for me, personal development side.
His Spirit.
Her Spirit.
Spirit, sorry.
Yeah, Her Spirit. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much for being a fantastic guest. If people want to find you, get hold of you, how do they do that, please?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Debbie Franklin on LinkedIn, or I've got an email address of proptechdebbie@gmail.com.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you all for you watching. Thank you for listening. Please, if you've got any comments, write it in there. If you want to get hold of Debbie, do get in contact. Thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you.
You're welcome.